Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
We saw Blade Runner 2049 again.
Yes.
We were both keen to see it again.
Yes.
I found it particularly rewarding the second time. I don't know about
I
you.
did as well.
A particular feature, a particular aspect of watching procedurals or films where revelations are quite important to the plot, that I think the second time you watch them, it's a really different experience because now you know everything, all the truth of all the characters and the story.
Yes.
I think the first time you're watching them, you're trying to follow the plot and you're trying to work out what's happening and so on and so forth, and that's why the revelations have a big impact. But it does mean that you're kind of distracted from everything else because the plot is the most important thing. And the second time you watch these films, so for instance, watching this, now you know from the start that Joe is not Deckard's son.
Yes.
And that actually it's a daughter, and you're led along the way thinking that he's the son the first time you watch it. But now that you know that, you can concentrate on so many other things.
Let me just interject with a couple of things that had been bothering me, right? So I kind of... Well, I'd like your view, but I'd also like just to get him off my chest, really. So I think in the last podcast, after we'd seen the film, I said something like, that I was queasy about the representation of women in the film, right? And actually, subsequently, I've heard from friends whom I like and respect very much, that they found the film dull, that they found it racist, that they found it sexist, and I'll begin with the sexist bit, because actually upon seeing the second film, what had made me queasy in the first film was, that women are machines, that some of them are there for sex, that there's a ninja woman, who is like seems a bit of a cliche from other action films from the 90s onwards, that had niggled at me. But actually, seeing the film again today, it's put all of those things at rest. I mean, I now see the film as, Kay, who kind of has these connotations. My friend Andy Griffith was saying, well, it has these connotations of like Kafka's Kay, the anonymous kind of person being kind of driven by forces he can't see or control. And then throughout the course of the film, he becomes Joe, like everyman Joe, right? And, what happens to him is, he falls in love with a machine who has shared a history with him and who he's learned to love and who has learned to love him as well, right? Because she self-sacrifices for him. The other thing that happens at the end is that he learns to love Deckard, who is potentially also a machine, right? So, what overcomes, he becomes humanized through kind of learning to love, that which is meant to be enslaved and unlovable, right? And actually the worst moment and the most touching moment in the film is the moment where he sees the same model of the woman he loved, right? But actually...
Joy, her name.
Joy, yes. But now removed, with all the history and feeling removed, and just kind of objectified into an object, kind of completely dehumanized and become just like a kind of a sex toy, right? And that's the saddest moment in the film.
That's what I said the first time. I said it was heartbreaking. Although
yes.
I didn't explain it in such beautiful terms.
Thank you. Anyway, so how you can call this a sexist film when that, if you agree that is its storyline, and that's what it does, right, then it seems to me to be like the opposite of it. And aside from that, there's such a range of representation of women, right? The leader of the resistance, the Robin Wright human police character, the person that's called Love, that is like the most advanced kind of machine who's like, the most powerful and knowable person next to the film's God, right? Like, or the creator, right? So there's just such an enormous range of representation that it kind of puzzles me, actually, So it shouldn't puzzle me, because when I said that I had that niggle, I can see how that niggle might be even more exacerbated if you're understanding through old tropes. But if you're actually kind of engaging with what the film has to offer you, to me, that's kind of a surprising conclusion. It's become even more surprising upon my second viewing. Right.
Which was the one called Love?
The ninja.
Is her name Love?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you know.
The ninja.
Yeah. So the creator calls her Love, right? You know, so...
Oh, I missed that line twice then.
Yeah, so, which is important, right?
Yeah.
Because she's the opposite of it, really, right? Like, you know, she's the machine who lacks love, really, in comparison to all the others. So I think that's kind of thematically really interesting and rich, really. He calls them his angels, right? Yeah.
Oh,
But
yeah,
of
well,
all
there's a
the
whole God thing going on with him.
Yeah, and he goes, of all my angels, love is the best, or something. He's got a line, something like that, right?
It's just one too many murmured lines of dialogue. Just occasionally. I go, oh, I missed that. Oh, damn. But, yeah.
Yeah. So, and the other thing that I just want to spew on was, you know, the accusation or the experience that people have that the film is dull. And actually, obviously, you can't deny people's experience. If they found it dull, it's dull to them. You know, but it made me think that maybe people have forgotten to the visual dimension of, you know, engaging with and making meaning from and feeling, you know, around cinema, right? That kind of...
It is feeling, isn't it?
It is.
It's a huge component of this film is atmosphere and feeling and the time it takes to... It's rich, you know?
Yeah.
Visually, particularly. And
but it also
gets inside you.
Sorry to cut you off.
No.
It also made me wonder if we're so used to watching narrative on television, which is really so plot laden, right, and in which dialogue occupies such a central place in communicating the plot and the story, that, you know, we've forgotten to just
watch images.
Look, right? Like, yeah, that kind of, you have this incredible image, it's this huge image, and it's conveying so much, it's so rich, right? That, and I think, at least, you know, from just casual conversations that I've been having with friends, you know, I mean, that doesn't, they don't seem to see that, really. And to be fair, we did see a couple of people leaving the theater today.
Yeah, they didn't seem to come back, did they?
Yeah, so other people are finding it dull.
I think also it is over 2.5 hours long, and I think once you get into a rut with a film, it can be hard to get out of it. I think, you know, it can be hard for the film to kind of win you back round.
Yes. But this idea that you're an agent, right? That you're somebody who's engaging with, you know, this incredible thing that's being presented with you, and that you have an active role to play in it, right? That you're not kind of just lying back and let it all happen to you. That, you know, the experience that you can have, you know, is reliant on you actively engaging, you know, all your senses with what the film has to offer, right? Kind of, yeah, I just kind of wondered if there's something there, because, you know, how this film that's so visually rich and beautifully designed and so gorgeously filmed, you know, somebody said, oh, I didn't like the design, I didn't like, you know, like, I just kind of...
yeah, I mean, that kind of baffles me.
It's slow, but it's very rewarding and rich, right? It rewards attention.
Yes.
Right? If you're looking...
It's not like it's hard to watch, right? It's not like you have to... It's not like if you're putting in no effort, it should be difficult to watch, you know?
No,
but it rewards your attention.
Yes, but I think if you're not putting in any effort, if you're not asking, what does that mean? Or why are we seeing this? You know, or trying to connect, you know, the patterns that recur throughout the film, both in gesture and dialogue. And so if you're not kind of actively, you know, trying to make sense of those things, if you're not actively engaging, it could be dull, because in a way, kind of not much happens.
Yeah, I think,
right?
Yes,
like in terms of plot, right? So yeah, I can understand that, but I also feel, well, you know, it's the audience's fault.
It is a little bit, isn't it? It's nice to blame an audience every now and again.
I do it all the time.
Something that I wanted to say was that the first time I saw it, I wasn't really moved, although I saw why it was moving at certain points, particularly towards the end. But I wasn't terribly moved. Whereas the second time we just saw it, I got a little bit weepy at the end.
Yes.
The very, very final moments where Deckard goes in to meet his daughter, and it's a wonderful performance from Harrison Ford. This kind of
wonderful.
this shaky, nervous, reaching out, and then this half smile, and then cut to black. It's beautiful, and I got a little bit choked, and it might partly be because I watched Notting Hill last night, and so I'm in that zone.
Right.
But I think Deckard is much more rewarding the second time round, because after there's such a build up from the first film, we've been waiting 35 years, and Deckard has become this kind of icon of cinema, and the whole question about is he a replicant or not is one of these kind of classic sort of cinema questions, despite the fact that I'm not convinced it's a very important one. It's big. And so you kind of, I think he's been built up an awful lot. Certainly was to me. The idea that this is very important characters coming back, and with the benefit of hindsight, and watching it the second time, there's so much about it which is just, he's just a man, right? He's not a superhero. He's just a man who fell in love with a woman, and now has had to live through this sacrifice of giving up his child.
Yes.
And that final reunion right at the end meant so much more the second time with the benefit of the hindsight and context.
For me, kind of, what I noticed much more this time, what made it more beautiful, is like the connections that you could make between scenes, right? So if you remember Joy, when she's with Joe, in the end, and he buys that new machine that basically kind of embodies her, right? That she's pure electronic code.
The Emanator.
The Emanator. And her first gesture is to feel the elements, right? To feel the rain,
yes.
right? That's kind of, and then you have Joe perform the same gesture on his death, right? Like he's feeling the snow, kind of. He's human in his loss and in his pain and in his want.
And so is Anna as well. It cuts straight to her feeling a kind of imaginary snow that she's making memories out of.
Yes.
There's a great emphasis on. It's like you were saying in the first podcast, touch, but you were talking about touch between people, trying to make a physical connection between people, but actually the touch of you with just the real world.
Yes.
And there's an emphasis as well on whether things are real or not, which, as there was in the first film, is that a real snake? Do you think I could afford a real snake? These things have gone by the wayside, and that continues in this film with the tree, despite the fact that it's dead.
Yes.
The prostitute character is still impressed by it. I've never seen a tree before.
Yes.
Is the dog real? And
yes. I had a thing. So a friend of mine asked me, what is the significance of the bees, right? And for me, the bees, there's that scene where he goes and there's a beehive, and kind of bees are a marker of life, and the continuation of life in the planet. You judge the environment's health by kind of the number of bees, right? But actually, there's also something about bees being part of a community and having like a shared history and everybody kind of contributing their bit, right? And there's that wonderful moment where, his hand is full of bees and you realize, well, he's a machine, he can't feel pain from it. He's immune to that. And then at the end, right, kind of there's that lovely thing where he's touching the snow, he's feeling the snow. There's a cut to the daughter using the snow as part of memories, right? Like memories that will now be embedded into a whole bunch of people who form part of this community, like the bees, who will now have like a shared history and a shared ethos and something. I thought. Anyway, that's my interpretation.
That's lovely. I think it's actually the most unrealistic part of the film is the bees, because as we know, bees are dying out, and in this terrible future where nothing lives, there's no chance of a bee.
Well,
I think that's right. I mean, it does sort of come out of nowhere. There is something about this isn't that important a point, but it is something I think I want to bring up, which is about what a replicant actually is. For one thing, there's this idea of how can a replicant reproduce, right? And I'm not convinced I could be wrong, but I'm not convinced that in either film it is really explained what a replicant is. There's clearly DNA involved because he can analyse the DNA as he does in the police station. Whether there are mechanical components or not, I don't think is ever been really established. And I think it's probably more likely that there aren't. These are just designed people, right? These are not machines exactly.
Yes.
Because actually, I think we were hasty in the first podcast talking about. We both just assumed that it had been settled that Deckard is a replicant.
Yes.
And watching it the second time, I was really paying attention to that. Actually, I think it really maintains the ambiguity because...
Yes, it does. You're right.
The idea... It's obviously Rachel is a replicant, and it's important that she's able to give birth, because that's the big deal at replicant giving birth. But whether she's procreated with a human or another replicant is not hugely important. It's the fact that one replicant at least, has been involved.
Well, it's a little bit important, I think, because that leader of the resistance basically says, if we can reproduce ourselves, if we can have children, then we're no longer slaves, right? So actually, that's
yes, it is important to a degree, but it really brings up the question is different depending on whether a human is required or not, isn't it?
Yes.
Because I mean, if Anna is half human, half replicant, then the barrier's been completely broken down. There's something in Trevor Noah's book talking about apartheid where he said, I'm paraphrasing, but the fact that a black person and a white person can have children is abhorrent to people who don't believe in race mixing because it proves that races can mix.
Yes.
And so the idea that can also happen in this, future with the replicants and the humans would be a fascinating one. It's not something the film brings up. Maybe if there's a third film, who knows what might happen.
Yes.
There is an idea that these things are designed to be slaves, right? I mean, actually...
you're told that.
Yeah, Jared Leto says we've lost our appetite for slavery apart from... except for replicants.
I think that's a major theme in the film. I mean, kind of these people are slaves, and kind of what you have is a struggle of liberation, to become independent and human and have agency and have control over your life.
Yeah, I mean, but it's more on a kind of a personal level, isn't it? Rather than a kind of, although you do see a resistance movement in the background, it is very much in the background. The idea of a political liberation is, whereas it's more of a personal liberation.
Yes, but the film adds the dimension there, so it's there, right? Now, I want to ask you a couple of questions because you're better at this than I.
Okay.
Now, people have talked about plot inconsistencies.
Okay.
Yes. Do you see any? What are they to you? So somebody mentioned, for example, why does Love leave Joe alive? Yeah, so when she goes and she kidnaps Deckard, why does she leave Joe alive? I mean, he's there, he's wounded, but he's alive and he goes back after her. So what, that's unclear.
I don't know.
Right, and also I think there's something about her. What's her motivation in all of this, right? Because you see, for a while, I actually thought that the film could be open-ended, right? Because there's part of the narrative is that there were actually twins, that a boy and a girl were both born, right? And on my first viewing, for much of the film, I thought that the boy and the girl might be Love and Joe, right?
Was that saying, because that's not actually in the film, the idea that they're twins. There is the thing about the conflict between the female and the male DNA, that there's a copy.
Well, they say there's a copy, right? But certainly it suggests the possibility of twins, right?
Yeah.
So because basically they tell you that there was a boy and a girl, and they shared the same DNA. Now, was one a copy of the other, right? And we eventually find out what has happened. But certainly, at a certain moment, the idea of there being possibly a boy and a girl is very much alive.
Okay.
Right? And I'm not sure that So for a while, I thought, oh, that would be interesting, right? If, those two were actually, found each other, right? So even at that moment where Joe's convinced that he is that child, right? I thought, oh, well, wouldn't it be interesting if then, later in the narrative somehow we get this, that love comes in as being the other, right? And for me, that created kind of, tension, and it kind of kept me alert through the first viewing, really.
Yeah.
So that was my question about, is the plot consistent, or are there things that kind of don't make sense? What did you make of Love? I'm calling her Love. Yeah, the Angel of Death. Going to kill the Robin Wright police officer. Why did she do it? Like, in a certain way, we know why she did it, because she wants to find...
She wants to find the child.
But why does she have to kill the woman in order to find the child?
Well, I suppose from a purely practical level, she has to kill her to get into the computer, but she does so really out of malice, doesn't she?
Yes.
I
mean, you'd think they were on the same side. That's, that's the solution that they both want. Or, does Joy want something... does Love want something else?
Such as?
Take over the world.
Well, I mean, the thing that is important to remember about Love is that she's acting on behalf of her master. She's still given orders, so she's not. I think she's not entirely autonomous. Like, the point is, she's still a replicant. Replicants are still slaves.
Yes.
So, despite the fact that she is functionally the villain of the film, ultimately she's not. In the overarching story sense, she's not. That's still Jared Leto's character.
Yes. Did you like him better this time around?
I did like him better this time. I didn't sort of dislike him the first time round. But I just felt slightly disappointed that I thought he was supposed to be a bigger villain than he was. I got the impression from the trailer particularly that he was supposed to be this big deal villain that they were going to sort of take down. And obviously, the film is not that at all. The film is not a fight against the good and evil of the big baddie. I do still think he's a little bit overwrought. I mean, he speaks like a really conventional movie baddie, talking of taking over the stars, this and the other. But he's a CEO. What CEO talks like this?
But actually, I thought that was brilliant, because the thing is that he says those lines, but he says it very nonchalantly. Actually, I don't think he underlines every intonation, and he doesn't put exclamation marks. It's so I think
he doesn't deliver the lines in an overall way, but the lines are themselves the kind of very showy, poetic.
Yes.
If you were one of the shareholders, you'd be going, "Get this guy, Jesus."
Yeah, but I think in terms of him as an actor, he underplays all of that. He throws all those lines away, basically.
Yeah, his performance is very good,
and visually, he's stunning, right? Like, kind of just as an image, that has been constructed with him. He's extraordinary, I think, and he's extraordinary gesturally. Like, there's something about, his face and the use of it, and of course, in those enormous close-ups on IMAX, right? I think they're very powerful.
His eyes as well. He's obviously kind of bionic to an extent. He's obviously a human.
Yes.
But he has this. He's
an enhanced human.
Thing that allows him to control these little flying droids.
Yes, and what are they?
And his eyes are he's got very severe cataracts.
He's got cloudy eyes like a sky, or like the view of a sky at night or something. You kind of see like a solar system in his eyes. It's got that kind of liquid, milky, but dark look.
I suppose it's the suggestion that he's lost his vision, and that's why they look like that, or that they've been enhanced, and that's why they look like that, and that's why he needs the little droids as well.
Yes. But what are the little droids? Are they meant to be like little fishes? Because,
Well, yeah, he has a little swarm of them. Like bees. He's the queen.
And there's something also threatening and accusatory. It's almost like... Yes. I wonder if they were a little bit like sniffer dogs about your programming, right? Because, kind of when Joe gets tested, right, and he doesn't pass the test. Why doesn't he pass the test? Because, he's feeling, it detects feelings. So, there was something about kind of, those little fish droids.
There is this accusatory thing going on where everyone is under surveillance, particularly replicants. I mean, when when Jared Leto is using these little drones to sort of look over the new replicant that's just been born, not born but made. One of them has a look at Love as well, and she has this kind of, why me?
Yes.
But everyone sort of, despite the fact that she's his right hand woman and she's been there forever.
Yes.
Still, she sort of doesn't escape the gaze. She has an interesting thing where she has a weird reaction to death in a way, despite the fact that she's so brutal. When Jared Leto kills the replicant,
yes,
she has a adverse reaction to it.
She cries.
Yeah.
Or she's got this teary, look in her face, right?
And there's another point, I can't remember which. But
which is why I find that character like kind of so interesting. It's almost like there's something going on, inside that she's got to keep in check. I thought also that that first killing of that replicant who hadn't quite come up to his expectations. I think part of the brutality of it is that the reason why she hadn't come up to expectation was because her womb, right, was not fulfilling its function, which is, he wants to find, a new type of replicant that can be completely under control, but, can also give birth.
Yeah.
Right. So he stabs her right in the womb. Right. And he says a line like
about being barren.
Yeah, about
Salted
being an empty
barren.
space or something. Yeah, a useless space or something. Right. So, which is kind of, it does feel like, incredibly.
Well, it's like it's being murdered for being a failure of a woman.
Yeah, exactly.
It's brutal, actually. It's horrible.
And what's even more brutal is there's something about. For some reason, that whole scene reminded me of Bambi. It's like
trying to stand.
Yeah, yeah, and also the positioning of the legs. It's kind of, and the actress playing her had quite large eyes, so I think there was kind of something like that.
There's it's trying to play up some of the innocence and as opposed to experience, I suppose,
and vulnerability and beauty. So anyway,
the camera kind of takes in her body with this long pan upwards that takes in a naked figure, and in this kind of, there's an awful lot of emphasis, isn't there, on naked women.
Yes, there is.
Those big adverts as well, those holographic billboards.
Yes,
there's an awful lot of
that. And I think this film has taken it further, because if I remember like the first film correctly, there was a lot of kimonos, and there was the Joanna Cassidy character, who was playing with her snakes in the circus or the strip show or whatever it was. So that has certain roots in the original film. But you see, one of the things, I mean, just to go, so just to be dialectical about it, one of the things that did make me think, that the film really is very sexist still, is that, the difference here is meant to be between humans and machines, right? And so you have
humans and
replicants.
Non-humans, like sort of imitation humans.
Yeah, sorry. Humans and non-humans, right? So, and the reason why you have all these pleasure, joys is, because kind of both non-humans and human men, want something perfect to have sex with. But then the distinction is human, non-human. Why aren't there all these male sex slaves half naked or, offering their services, to the women who are humans, right?
Well,
so, yeah, that is sexist, So I think there is, well, I suppose my
I think it's likely to be more of a demand from the men.
Why? That's such a sexist thing to say.
No, but I think that's probably. I think, to be honest, that's probably the way it is. I think I think men are more promiscuous.
Well,
and cheat more,
perhaps.
And, I mean, for instance, do gay women have cottages? Like, I don't think it's a gay thing. I think it's a masculine thing.
Well, that's probably true, but nonetheless,
Which I realise how kind of general that statement
nonetheless, I think it is telling that the assumption. Well, the assumption is that women wouldn't want to have sex, right? The assumption is also that there would be no gay people, amongst the humans.
With the exception, Robin Wright does want to have sex with Joe.
Oh.
Do you remember she when she's in his apartment and they're talking about the child's got loose or the news of the child has got loose, so what's going to happen next? And she asks him the memory and they're having a drink, and she says, "What happens if I finish this?" And there's this implication of, are we going to? Because then actually,
okay, no, you're right.
Because he then talks about it with Joy afterwards.
Okay, so but you see, like,
so she's sexually,
and I think the thing is they can't say no, can they? But that's that could have been brought out more. In any case, I think there is an argument to be made on that level, right? And also, kind of, people have been talking about the racism in the film, and again, I get it, right? Like, it's a film in which the protagonist is a white guy, but I just think, in comparison to what are you comparing it to? If the film had starred Denzel Washington, which it could very well have done, then the balance of all of that thing would have changed, really. Yeah, but I kind of.
I mean, I suppose from just a plot logic sense, if the main character were not white, then there wouldn't be this question of am I the son or not?
Yes.
Because that would be different if he was black. But I mean, I do think it's basically notable that there are only two black characters. One of them has almost no lines. He's just one of the cops in the back of the room, and the other one is the child slaver.
Yes.
I can't think of another one.
Yes, but I think you can see that the film has taken pains with it, right? Because, the child slaver is basically a Fagin character, right? There's no need to cast that, I mean, I think there was some blind casting in relation to that, really. And then certain things you wouldn't want to cast, because then you open up yourself to accusations of racism. I mean, for example, I noted that the three hookers that approach him at the beginning are all white, right? And kind of, you can understand why that would be the case. So I just think to sit, and don't get me wrong, I think there are problems with all of the above, but I think they're just the problems of Hollywood cinema. I don't see why you would single out this particular film for
It's possible that people would single it out just thinking about it because of what Ridley Scott said about Exodus when he was making Exodus, and people were saying this is a film set in the Middle East, essentially. Why is everybody white and American? And he said, if you want to try and make this film with Middle Eastern actors, good luck to you. You'll never get the funding. More or less what you said.
Right.
So, and obviously this film is produced by Ridley Scott still because
but this is an American film. I mean, there could have been kind of.
Sure, I'm not saying that's much of an argument really. I'm saying that might be a reason.
Instead of casting Robin Wright, you could have cast Halle Berry or some 40-ish or Jada Pinkett Smith or.
Sure, but then what people would then point out is, but they didn't.
Yeah,
that's the point.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So. Anyway, I
think the girl who played Joy is Cuban. Although she doesn't particularly look Hispanic or Latino, but
she looks Cuban. Actually, she does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I don't really know Cubans. I only know Castro. Give me a sec. I just want to find out what the music is for Joy, because I can't think. It's not the Pastoral Symphony, but it's. Is it Peter and the Wolf? The music that when she starts up. And everyone hears. I mean, actually, I thought this was. And I thought when I thought this is quite a sexist thing to think. But on a couple of occasions, the music, and then people hear
a Disney film, but
look it up. It's Peter and the Wolf. I'm sure it is. But when that music plays, and people hear that he has a virtual girlfriend. The one of them is Love, and Love says, "Oh, I see you're a customer," and he goes, "Yes, she's very realistic." And the other one is the prostitute who says, "Oh, you don't like real girls." And when that happened, I thought, why wouldn't you just put her on silent? But then I realised that is really sexist. Put your girlfriend on silent. I'm sure it's Peter and the Wolf. Which then, because to be fair, when I thought it was the Pastoral Symphony, I thought, oh well, this is kind of related to you. It's a kind of imitation of something natural. But then, if it's Peter and the Wolf, then I don't know Peter and the Wolf all that well. You see, so
no,
it's
I don't
tougher to interpret.
Which
is why, to be honest, they should have used the Pastoral Symphony, because then I would have had an easier time.
Okay. Do you want the Parisian caramel?
What?
Do you want the caramel from Paris?
Oh no, I'm alright. Thanks. I better not.
Okay.
It's a great film. It's a great film. There's so much food for thought, and as I said the first time, I can live in it. I can bathe in it. It's beautiful to just sit there and allow. The work that's gone into it. The design, the thought, the care, the imagination. It's unparalleled, and then the work in actually making it real. It's incredible. There's not a kind of a wrong foot in kind of the way it's put together. It's amazing to look at.
It is very beautiful, and actually, the whole beginning, when that little car is driving through space, or that little spaceship is driving through space, it felt like a 1980s Nintendo game or something, right? Like, there was something
the top down.
There was something kind of, cheap looking about it, but evoking of an era or something. And then kind of the way that the design unfolds and that it all kind of meshes together is really kind of very beautiful.
And it coheres. It has actually, in some respects, it has more of a comic book feel than comic book movies do, because comic book movies are all about the plots. They're all about the characters that you know from the comics and the plots and everything. But what they don't have is a comic book look. They just look like action movies. And actually, to find a comic book movie that looks like a comic book, you have to go back to Hulk, the Ang Lee one, where he's trying to do stuff with panels kind of crossing over each other, which doesn't really work all that well, but he's trying.
Yes. I mean, to me,
in this film, there's a use of colour, the way that comic books do, with the way that palettes are used to envelop scenes and give them cogency. So you have the entire thing, the yellow and orange and red, when he goes to the radioactive place, and you have just the white. It's almost grayscale, some of those things in the police station.
I also, I mean, so in a way, kind of, the comic book movie analogy doesn't work for me, but I think what you do point out that I feel quite strongly is that, in comic books you have panels that are so symbolic, right? Like, the kind of, they really are trying to express within very limited means and kind of, get the most expressiveness out of that kind of little square box.
Line drawings, basically.
Yeah. And you get that here, right? Because some of the images are actually quite simple, like graphically, but then they're kind of very potent. They're very powerful. They work very effectively.
And it's that simplicity of what the images are built out of that makes them more powerful. They're not cluttered, and that simplicity of design.
Yes.
But what it also takes basically is a real kind of artist's eye to build to create those
images. Yes.
I mean, there are also very simple films, very visually simple films, and that aren't expressive.
And to go back, to I think why maybe some people are bored, when watching the film, is because most of the film's meaning and feeling and expression is being conveyed through these images. It's not through action, largely, and it's not through words, right? The images are carrying the majority of the work of the film, and if you don't give yourself over to them, and if you don't kind of engage and question and engage in a dialogue with those images, then I can see why the film seems an impoverished experience to some, but not to me.
All I meant to say about the comic books was not that Blade Runner is trying to use panels, so it's not at all. All I meant to say was that actually, it's just a criticism of comic book movies, because if you're trying to interpret comic books onto the cinema screen, you think you'd like to do it visually, which they don't at all. Whereas actually you can identify a certain technique, which is the use of colour palettes, to give scenes cogency. That is a technique which is absolutely on display in Blade Runner, and you'd think that it should really be on display in the Avengers or something. It's just not.
Yes.
And like I say, if you go back and watch Hulk, there's a couple of those scenes with montages where images start kind of flying in from all over the place, and they actually use panel-like imagery to build these montages. It really doesn't work overall, but he's trying, and he's going, let's, instead of just having a comic book character do the stuff that he does in the comics. Let's try and convey it visually too. It's a failure, but a noble one, that film.
Okay, last word on Blade Runner 2049 second viewing.
Superior to the first time, and the first time was great. It's so much more rewarding because once you've got all that stuff in your head about what the plot is, and you no longer have to concentrate on following the details. Kind of character and the look of the film become so much more important, and they are rich and fulfilling and nutritious, like the best breakfasts.
Okay, on that note, let's leave it here.